Hi, Barry Rosenzweig here. I'm in studio with Jay Ettinger. He's a real estate agent with Edina Realty, and I've known Jay for many, many years. And we're going to talk real estate today. Welcome to today's show. I'm sitting here with Jay Ettinger today, and he's a real estate agent. And Jay and I have known each other for many, many years. I don't know how long it's been, Jay. Do you
I would
remember?
guess 15,
Yeah, probably about
15,
that.
16 years,
Yep,
probably in that
yep.
ballpark.
And I want to hear from you a little bit about your background, how you got into real estate, a little bit where you're at with it. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a graduate of St. Paul Academy, which is just right down the street from where we're sitting right now. And to be honest, you left high school kind of at a loss with what to do with my life. Went to the University of Minnesota for a short while. Went to the University of St. Cloud, actually, St. Cloud State, prior to Minnesota. Um, and then came out of college really kind of, to be honest, kind of lost and went back to St. Paul Academy and coached high school basketball and baseball there. I had some former coaches that kind of reached out to me, knew that I was in a kind of a weird place in my life and a kind of a lonely place in my life, and brought me in back to school to help out there, and that really had a major impact on my future. And from there, worked a number of different jobs, bartending over at the University of Minnesota, and then worked in the family business for about 7 years with my mom. And my mom probably my favorite person in the world, but very different personalities. And every family dinner, every family outing became all about business instead of family, and there weren't great boundaries that we had kind of laid down and crossed over the years. So I decided that I wanted to go out and do something on my own. I was about 30 years old at that point, and I'd heard the cliche over and over and over again. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I had my St. Paul friends that I grew up with. I had people from synagogue growing up Jewish in St. Paul that I grew up with that I knew, and joined a fraternity at the University of Minnesota, and then my bartending friends. And so I had a really kind of wide range of social circles, and decided to get into real estate, knowing that taking that old cliche into mind that it's who you know and not what you know, and it's paid off well for me over the years.
Well, it's good. It's kind of what I figured and I knew about, and it's, nice story. Um, so when you first got into real estate, sales, we'll call it, I don't know if you call it sales exactly, consulting.
Consulting, marketing.
Yeah,
Sure.
okay. Tell me a little bit about just briefly about the how you become a real estate agent, and then maybe a little bit about the designation of realtor versus real estate agent. I think a lot of people kind of want to know how
Sure.
that works. And
So for me, being new to the business, and really, for me, it was all about culture. And when I got out of real estate school, went to CAP, which is now known as Kaplan, it was called ProSource back in the day. When I got out and had my license and passed my testing, I interviewed with four different brokers. I should say two different brokers and four different offices, and basically went where it just felt like the right culture. Where I'll just say it was Edina Realty that hired me, and where I'm still at, where I still hang my hat, is Edina talked about the customer experience. And I was young and I was certainly dumb, but I knew well enough that if you take care of people, things all work out in the end. And they didn't talk about numbers, they didn't talk about commission dollars. It was really all about the culture and the culture of helping people. And that really talked to me, spoke to me, I should say. And so that's where I decided to hang my hat. Now, at the time, I went to the Highland office, which is just down the street from where we are again, because that was home. I was living on Grand Avenue, and it was nearby, and it seemed like the right fit. About a year later, I moved over to 50th in France, where I still am 19 years later. And I had just a great, for me, it's the leadership. I had a manager, John Smaby, who's now the National Board of Realtors president, who was one of my dearest friends and a mentor to me. And, moving over to 50th in France is probably the best decision I've ever made in my career and my adult life professionally.
okay, I follow up with that a little bit. Is I know sometimes people hear the word real estate agent and realtor. Okay,
Okay.
it realtor is a certain designation, isn't it, versus just a real estate agent, or is everybody kind of a
Well,
realtor?
I think it's a little gray there. I think most people, there are certain people that take that very seriously, that realtor designation.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we get older, or as time goes on, we're not this new generation of younger agents. I don't think that rings true as much as it used to. I think the younger agents, the millennials, are fine with the designation of real estate agent.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can tell you from my personal experience. I don't really, I can't say I've experienced hearing a major difference between the two.
Okay.
So
And then when you first started out, do you get any kind of a salary or a some kind of a payment where you work against it and get paid through the commissions later? I mean, how does the
So I
basic?
think most people, and I can't. Once again, everyone's got a different experience, and I certainly was not well versed in negotiating when I first got in the business. I think the one thing I learned about the real estate business, and maybe it's changed in the 20 years I've been in the business. What I learned shortly after joining Edina Realty is when you interview with a brokerage, you feel like you're interviewing for a job. Yet it's very different because most real estate brokerages are going to hire you. They want you. They need numbers. There are brokers, local brokerages and national brokerages that rely on just numbers because they're handing out fees to these agents and they rely on volume. And some agents are going to make it and some aren't. But the volume of agents they have in their office, pays the bills. From what I understand, that's a business model that's somewhat foreign to me, but it exists. For me, no, there was no. I was on my own. I mean, it was 9 months before I sold my first house, and I was spending money and writing checks, and I certainly wasn't receiving them. But once you have your first sale, hopefully your confidence goes up, your experience level certainly goes up, and things just seem to snowball for people after that first kind of get over that first hump. But no, there was no salary or draw or anything offered to me. I can't speak to others. I don't know how those work. I'm sure some people maybe negotiate, especially if there's something about them that seems very promising. Maybe they're coming from another career where they're very successful, and the broker sees something in them. I'm guessing there's probably things that could be negotiated. I never personally experienced anything like that. I was on my own.
Do you get office space though, or do you get some kind of marketing help, or do you what part of it, initially what does the broker do?
You generally pay for that.
You pay for yourself.
You do. You generally, right now I don't take an office space. I office out of my house.
Sure.
The office is there for me to use. My assistant is there probably 3 to 4 times a week. But if I were to take an office space, then my arrangement with Edina Realty would be different, where I would be paying a higher fee to them. And that could work out in a number of different ways, whether it comes out of commission dollars or it's a set fee. But I haven't had an office personally, I think in about 8 years.
Okay.
I've just officed out of the house just to avoid that fee, and I'm just more comfortable because here's the thing. Real estate office is great. It's a great source of information. People are sharing information, and that's the one thing I love about the company I'm with is people play really well in the sandbox together. We share information. If I know someone in the office is looking for a certain property in a certain part of town and I hear about it, I share that information immediately. And what goes around comes around. But at the same time, when you go to the office, it can tend to be a little bit of a social place, and I don't get as much done.
And you don't make money sitting in the office.
Exactly.
You have to be out showing houses
Exactly.
and meeting with people and helping them with
Exactly.
things.
And there are those agents that seem to be in the office a lot. Let's just say that.
I understand.
Yeah.
So, being that you're strictly on a commission, as you said, you have a network of people you've developed over the years, which is, I'm sure, very helpful, and they trust you and they like you. And
Sure hope so.
so did you reach out to those people initially, and how do you generate some of your
That's a
clients?
great question. So listen, I got in the business in 1999. I still had an AOL email address and was, I can remember the dial-up sound connecting to AOL every day. The technology has changed the industry. It's amazing what technology has done for this industry. When I got in the business, and I can only imagine how things were done before I got in the business. But when I got in the business, if there was new software that at the time was cutting edge, but I used to have to fax listings to my clients. You couldn't send email attachments. Email was prevalent. I mean, email existed, But it wasn't as easy as sending a PDF now as was it back then. It was impossible to do, and the technology wasn't integrated with the MLS, where you could email from the MLS. There was a lot of copy pasting going on. There was a lot of, like I said, I'm literally using the fax machine. That changed, not too long after that, into the 2000s. So getting my name out there, like I said, technology's changed things. I've always been very involved in philanthropic activities, and the easiest way for me to promote myself and do it really subtly was to basically just have a signature on an email. When I'd email people about a charity event that I was involved in, and at the bottom it would say, J. Ettinger, Edina Realty, and I can't tell you how much business I got off that simple signature. And those signatures back then were just, typed out text. Now they're,
Right.
they're pretty fancy. But that's literally kind of what propelled my career, I think, is just being involved in the community and reminding people in a subtle way of what I was doing.
And I would expect as you build up clients over the years, it starts to become a higher percentage of referrals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then, listen, if you do a good job for people, and you leave a mark on their lives, because when you're dealing with buyers and sellers, you become part of their family. You're literally with them and talking to them multiple times a day. I always make the joke that, if I sell 50 properties a year, I feel like I got dumped 50 times a year as well, because you're with someone all the time and then all of a sudden it's just over.
Right.
And it's the keeping in touch part is the part that can be real challenging, because you want to keep in touch with them, A, for future referrals, but B, just because you've established that relationship, and it's
Sure.
a relationship business. And I always take relationships over any amount of business, just because I enjoy people, and you become a pretty intimate part of their lives.
And you've spent a lot of time with them. You learn about them, you learn about their families, and as they say, it's the biggest purchase in your lifetime for most people.
Yeah, and I'm very sensitive to that, and very sensitive to that transaction is much bigger than any commission will ever be to any agent. How it affects their lives and their families' lives is much more impactful than a commission will ever be for a real estate agent. So it's a huge process. It's very time consuming. It can be very, very emotional, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
And to be in the middle of that and kind of helping people wade their way through the waters is a big responsibility, and something that most agents, I think, take pretty seriously.
And I'm sure it's really a positive experience for the most part. I mean, some of the transactional things can get a little bit emotional, but it's really a positive experience because you're getting somebody into a home that they're going to spend a lot of time on, potentially grow their family in, and sometimes they're in there for their lifetime.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm blessed that after 20 years of being in this business, I can pick and choose a little bit if I want to work with someone or not. I've had a couple instances where I've met with people and I just didn't get a good feeling from them, and it wouldn't matter to me if it's a small little condo somewhere in town or if it's $1 million mansion. It doesn't matter to me. If you're not going to enjoy that experience and they're not going to enjoy you, at this point in my career, it's not something I want to take on. And I would refer it out to someone who might have a personality that matches theirs better.
And as an attorney, I run into the same thing with clients.
Yeah.
So there are many clients I won't even let hire me because I have to have that same exact
I can imagine.
relationship with them, same as
Yes.
you would.
Well,
and I understand that.
And
completely.
especially because it's so emotional. Because it's so emotional, I would not want to be in the middle of something with someone that I don't think I'm going to see eye to eye with. And usually those things, might be around disclosure items.
Sure.
I've had clients, in the past not want to disclose certain things, and I won't be a part of that. It's part of the process is doing things by the book, and having people who want to do things the right way.
Well, ethics are an important part of it, and that's how you build your reputation.
Exactly.
Let's just shift gears a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the MLS, the multiple listing service. I think that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people.
Sure.
It's not something they really focus on when they work with real estate agents because they're more interested in, the buying process,
Right.
selling process, and explain a little bit how that works and how the working with different agents, just sort of the summary of how that might work, and
Yeah, I think the MLS is still the most powerful tool that drives our industry as far as marketing properties. But things have changed quite a bit. You've got the with Zillow and Trulia, they've got new features that include coming soon, or make me move, and actually the MLS has now got a coming soon feature itself. But the rules with that are, you can advertise a property prior to it going on the MLS and prior to it accumulating market time, but you're not allowed to show it. Well, on Zillow, people privately and agents are posting their listings prior to going on the market. You know, I myself a couple of years ago put my condo on Zillow for Make Me Move. I put it on at a ridiculous price just to see if anybody reached out, and certainly I sure enough I did get a couple hits off that. MLS is still, the most powerful tool in the industry. It's the best way to open the floodgates and expose your listing, your properties to the highest, the largest audience. The other websites certainly create a lot of activity, and our clients seem to be on those websites quite a bit more than we are, where I kind of still rely on the MLS to get my information. I have clients emailing me all day about stuff from these other private websites.
They are on the MLS, or some are not?
Both. Some are.
Okay.
Some of the listings are. I would say more often than not they are on the market. They're finding, but if they go into the Make Me Move feature, they go into the Coming Soon, they might find stuff.
Okay, which are not on the MLS yet.
Which are not on the MLS yet. Correct.
And are those privately listed, or posted, or are they?
So what I'll tell you, one of the things I do with most sellers, if they're living in a desirable area, is I may suggest that they do a pre-list on their property.
I know you do a lot of those.
Yep. And I'm sure you've seen that on my Facebook page.
Yes.
That's probably the thing I use my Facebook page the most these days for, is just to market pre-lists.
Sure.
The advantage to a pre-list is, and there are some disadvantages, because you're not getting maximum exposure that you would on the MLS, but you can market a property without accumulating market time. You can you're marketing a property that people have a human, there's a human nature where people want to know about something that no one else knows about.
Demand.
So if they come and look at the property, and they feel like no one else knows about it, there's an emotional attachment potentially to that property, especially if they like it.
Getting maybe a better deal, or
Exactly.
getting what they want before somebody else jumps on
Exactly. And preventing us as an agent to bring it to market and opening the floodgates.
it. Sure.
So the positives of pre-listing to me are, you're getting free feedback before you go to the market, before you accumulate that market time. You're getting hopefully constructive feedback about things you could change. Here's a perfect example. I just had a house that we were going to go on the market for $700,000. We had 3 pre-list showings. The feedback was the kitchen was dated. Okay, the rest of the house was great, but the kitchen was dated. I had already had my painter go over and give my clients a bid on painting their kitchen cabinets. And they didn't want to spend the money. It was $5,000 to change the whole look of the kitchen, which is my opinion. They went ahead, took the leap of faith, trusted me. We went on the market. We had 12 showings in 36 hours, and they had 2 offers and ended up $30,000 over asking price, after the 3 people had seen it at $700,000 that weren't interested.
Mm-hmm.
So that constructive feedback they got from those pre-list showings just confirmed what I was telling them about what needed to be done, and helped kind of get them over the hump.
Does there help testing price as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell people, generally, if we're going to pre-list, we're going to go on at a higher price than we would actually go to the market with.
To test and see what your maximum you potentially can get.
Exactly. And because if here's the old, John Smaby. I remember John Smaby pulling me in his office when we were talking about pre-listing and MLS listing years and years and years ago. Was, let's say you had a Van Gogh painting in an auction hall, and you only allowed 2 people in, yet there's 100 people outside the auction hall that wanted to get in and bid on it. Where are you going to get your best price? And that was his logic about, you put it on the MLS and you open the floodgates. I agree with that completely. But you're also risking the fact that if no one wants it, the market time accumulates, and immediately your clients could be damaged by that. So to kind of put it out there, test it at a little bit of a higher price. Buyers are generally a little bit more understanding the house isn't on the market, so it might not be in perfect shape. That showing, actually getting people in for showings that are a little more flexible and understanding about that. they're not going to necessarily see it when they want to see it, because once a house is on the market, buyers have expectations. So,
how much do you get involved in giving advice about upgrading properties, internally, externally, cosmetic or for, maybe even much more so than that, and how they can maximize not only the time it takes to sell, but justifying the price they could get for doing those items?
I do that quite a bit, but I also rely on a couple people. I have a stager who's got an interior design background, and I feel a lot more comfortable having her answer those questions and paying her a fee myself to go in and not only tell my clients how to stage their house, and then with staging, I'm not talking about bringing in furniture, how to kind of use and lose what they have in the house already. And she gives them kind of a consultation. And then she also answers those kind of questions about, does it make sense to paint? Does it make sense? She's also a licensed real estate agent, to be honest with you. So she understands the kind of return you get as well.
Okay. So that brings me to another question. Let's talk about staging. Okay. Explain a little bit about staging and what the benefits are of I understand if there's an empty house because people moved already, obviously there's no furniture, it doesn't give you that comfort level.
That's easy conversation to have with people.
Yeah,
if the house is empty. If the house isn't empty and you want them to stage it, that's a little more awkward, difficult, and uncomfortable conversation to have with them.
And then is it a combination between what they have, what they want to go put in storage, and maybe bringing other things in, or?
Usually less is more, but I will tell you, you don't want an empty house, because there's a number of reasons you don't want an empty house. Number one, empty house screams that you have a desperate seller, right? That's probably living somewhere else and paying rent or mortgage somewhere else. So buyers immediately think they have an upper hand, and they kind of go to this mindset that we've got a desperate seller, which is not necessarily the case. Number two, when I walk into a house and it's empty, your eyes are going to be drawn to every flaw, every imperfection that exists, whether it be on the walls, the floors, whatever. When a house is furnished, your eyes aren't drawn to those imperfections. And then the other thing is, a lot of people would think an empty room feels bigger than a furnished room, and that's just not true. Generally a furnished room is going to feel larger than an empty room.
Because what's in there.
Right.
You can picture it.
The volume of, exactly. And so those are three reasons why, and listen, and getting back to the awkward conversation, yeah, sometimes you have to tell your clients that their taste is not necessarily what's in right now. And that's a very tough conversation. Another reason why I usually bring my stager in to have those conversations with them, so I don't have to, because I'm the one that's going to be in it with them for the long haul.
And as far as the staging goes, who typically pays for that? And approximately, I know it's all over the board, but what can somebody expect to pay for something like that?
So I just had a 5,000 square foot plus house staged, but it was really only staged on the main level. And the reason, my clients were on a tight budget. They just bought another big house and were moving into it, and their house was going to be vacant, and they didn't want to spend the money up front on the staging. Now, one of the things I always offer my clients is I'm always willing to pay for any work they want to have done on their house if they sign a listing contract with me that says that they're going to pay me back and reimburse me at closing. That I'll make those payments up front to lighten their load.
And that's not common, is it?
I think it's not common, but I think there's a number of established agents that it's making my job easier if they allow me to do this. If they trust me to do this work, and and I usually have them sign a contract saying for some reason the house doesn't sell, that they're still going to reimburse me. But I'm trying to make my life easier and make their life easier by they've already got a lot of out-of-pocket expenses having a second house in most cases. I'm just trying to lighten their load. But I will tell you, the staging process is generally paid for by the seller or the homeowner. And in this case, we just stage the first floor, because first impressions are everything, right? Once they get upstairs to the bedrooms, you can kind of imagine what a bed's going to look like, a double bed, a king-size bed, a queen-size bed, whatever, and kids' furniture or whatever you're staging. That's the easy part for a buyer to visualize. A living room, family room, some of those things are not as easy.
Where you spend most of your time.
Exactly.
And you want somebody to walk in and go, wow.
Right. And listen, people, they say that in the first 7 seconds someone walks into a house, they've already made their decision whether they're excited to go up to the second floor and see the bedrooms, or they're thinking about the next house on their tour. So the first impressions go a long way. So that's where it's best to spend your money, is on the main floor in that first impression area.
So give me, I know, again, let's just go back. Give me a range on prices. I mean, if it's an empty house.
Sure.
Then, and let's just say even a basic average price for a
Yep.
basic staging for a average size
So
house.
the stager I use, who I think is the most reasonable, and I've dealt with a number of them. They're all terrific, but they're the most reasonable as far as pricing goes. They basically, on a house that's probably 3,000 square feet to do most of the house, you're going to be about $3,500 to $4,000. But what they do is that number is good for 90 days, and then they charge 10% every month after that. Okay. So if it's $4,000 for this house to do the whole house, after 90 days, it's $400 a month. Pretty reasonable, where others will charge quite a bit more.
Okay.
And that's what kind of separates the company that I use with the others, is their back end, their long-term fees are a lot less expensive.
And they do all the work.
They do. They come in. They have a
bring it in,
designer.
They
Yep.
set it up, everything. For
Exactly.
you.
They usually have someone come out, take pictures first. They have a designer come out and then show up with a moving truck and unload their the furniture and basically give the house a whole makeover.
Let me just ask you about photos and videos of the home. How often is that done anymore?
It's the most important part of our job, and it's the easiest part of our job, and it's still. I just was about to list a condo, and doing my research, and a unit in the same building came on the market, and obviously the agent had used his iPhone or some kind of a digital camera to take these photos, and they were far from professional. And then I set up an appointment to go look at that unit, and it was embarrassing for me, and I was pretty candid with that agent in my feedback to him, that he wasn't doing his clients any favors, and he wasn't professionally marketing the property. And I usually don't overstep my bounds that way, but he really was. Not only was he hurting his client, though, he's also hurting my client, because my client's going to be listing in the building,
Sure.
and they're not going to get the price that his clients aren't going to get the price to help justify my client's price.
Sure.
So he's hurting all of us, and there's no excuse for an agent not to use professional photos in every single property they list. There's just no excuse for it.